It's another episode 3, and we are down for You're Wrong, Here's Why. And I'm so excited for my guests today, Danny Minton, Josh Bell. Thank you both for joining me. It is very excited to have you both because I've talked to both of you guys. And you both have very different outlooks on films, which is why I think this show works, because we want people to have opposing arguments, opposing thoughts. So really quickly, let's talk about Danny. Danny has been a critic for 20 years, writes for Houston Chronicle as well as Houston community newspapers. You can find him on Crunch on this, and BFCA or CCA member now. So welcome, Danny.
Thank you. Cron.com. You can look up my reviews there.
All right, and then Josh Bell, known throughout, I want to say the world, as Josh Bell hates everything, is his standpoint, and we love him for it. So, film critic since 2002, can be found on TV, radio, print, online, so many great places. So, thank you very much, Josh.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here.
All right, so first and foremost, I want to jump into some topical things that are out there right now. Number one being, we're pushing back more films. So I don't know if you guys have heard some of these things already, but Gru was just pushed back. So Minions 2, The Rise of Gru was pushed back a year. Now, instead of July of this year, it is July 2021. We now also have Sing, which went from July to December of this year. Top Gun Maverick actually went from this year until December. So that was supposed to come out, I think, June or something, and now it's December of this year. Quiet Place 2 also moved back. It's now officially in December. So that's something that is going to be, it's going to be a busy December, actually. And there's a couple of things they moved to. SpongeBob moved to end of July. That was previously May, I think. And then Tomorrow War with Chris Pratt and is undated now. They stopped production on the Wicked Broadway adaptation. So there's a lot of things going on right now, How does this affect you guys in your movie worlds? I mean, if it looks at it, our worlds, we kind of tentpole our movies sometimes by looking at a calendar. Like, I'm really excited for the next Avengers, or I'm excited for the next, I want David Fincher to make something else, and this is going to be the tentpole. So how does it affect your guys' lives on a regular basis?
I mean, just the uncertainty. Go ahead.
Let's talk Josh first.
All right, I'll go. We have to have stuff to review, and so when things aren't coming out, we can't write about them. But of course, if the theaters are closed, it doesn't really make. We're lucky right now, at least, that there are plenty of movies being released on demand, and even if they're holding most of these blockbuster movies to release in theaters, and I hope that they will release them in theaters, we still have plenty to cover. So as far as I'm concerned, it just goes along with everything that's happening right now. If the theaters aren't open, obviously the movies aren't going to be released. So it makes complete sense that they've been pushed, and it doesn't really affect what I'm doing right now, which is having shifted my reviews to on-demand and streaming, which I'm guessing is the case for everyone.
True enough. How about you, Danny? How's everything over in Houston?
Same here. I mean, I'm still looking forward to the same films, right? I still can't wait to see pretty much everything you just mentioned, except for Groot. But it's just, who knows when we're going to see it. So I'm going to wait my turn. I'm catching up on a lot of television that I've been missing out on. Eventually that will stop as well. We're not going to see all that content be coming out but it's great right now. But when we start to pull back productions of everything, I think we will have a black hole. But hopefully we can catch up and still be excited about the stuff that's coming out when we get back to normal, if we get back to normal.
When it comes to these film delays, it's definitely going to, change what we do going forward. So, I am going to be interested to see how they release and what the release schedule is. Do they need to still try to grab the end of this year, or is it just like all the kids in school? Like, is this year a wash? Are we just going to say, no, it's not going to happen? We're going to save ours for people who are going to have maybe extra money as of 2021, maybe not so much this year, or are they going to maybe just aim for end of the year and just hope and pray, and we'll see. So that's it for that one. I am looking forward to seeing some of these films, but what are you gonna do? Like, we have no real options when it comes to that too. So let's move on to our first topic, which is, do writers and directors have a responsibility to portray historical events accurately. Now, Danny says yes, they do, but Josh says no. And now this is something that's very interesting because, we're in a world of make believe and fiction and what is fun and what's more interesting. But sometimes we go off the rails altogether. So there's a lot of that out there. So I guess let's just start with your guys' first opinions on this topic. So Danny, why do they have a responsibility?
Well, I think we're in a world where we have a number of kids who think Game of Thrones is real, right? We have to be careful about, they get their history from movies. They're not getting it from their books. They're not getting it from their schools. I'm not saying everything has to be completely accurate and no creative license. I think there can be definitely creative license. And as long as things are obviously wrong, I mean, I love Hamilton. I've seen it 3 times. I plan on seeing it again this summer when it comes back to Fort Worth. It's wonderful, but it's obviously wrong, right? They do everything as historically accurate, but with, different races playing different roles. And it's a fantastic way of doing things. But I do think as long as kids are taking this stuff so seriously and they're not going out on their own and learning history the way they should and the way we did, hopefully, I think filmmakers should portray as accurately as possible those events, or at least make sure that they understand the context if they don't.
And Josh, why do they not have necessarily a responsibility in this aspect?
Well, I don't think filmmakers are responsible for the fact that kids may be idiots or whatever. I don't think as an artist, as a creative person, you need to make up for the lack of education. That's not what a movie is for. So I'm not saying that filmmakers should be reckless. I think we're not that far off in our is that for me, responsibility to create something artistic. And so if you are deliberately changing or changing details about history and it's so vision, then I think that's perfectly fine. And I think some movies that are based on historical events or based on true stories that take more artistic license. I mean, you're talking about Hamilton. Hamilton is better because they make changes and they throw in anachronistic things. And that's much more exciting and interesting than just a straightforward presentation of that history. And so I think if it enhances the artistry, then you don't need to step back and say, but wait, what if some kid thinks that dragons really existed in medieval Europe or whatever? Like, who cares? If you're making something that is expressing your vision and that is entertaining your audience, I think the most important thing. But I do think there's plenty of historical movies or biopics that just don't care about the facts and they change things just for lazy reasons or because they don't have the creativity to put it all together properly. And then I don't think that's really there's no value in doing that. But to me, judging a movie, I'm not concerned about whether it's historically accurate. I'm concerned about whether it's artistically enhancing or not.
And that's just something that I did some digging on too to find out, because there's a lot of lists out there about this topic. And one of the things that I was looking at was how many movies that I love are actually part of this, I don't want to say fiasco, but the way of just pulling wool over your eyes to make certain either certain demographics, certain countries, certain people happier. When I come into this point, I bring up, first the movie that was really hard for me was the movie U-571. Amazing film about getting the Enigma machine. So great. The problem is, this was not an American operation. It was a British one. So not only was it not, Matthew McConaughey wasn't there, of course, but it was also not even American people there. Also, it even this whole saga of U-571 and, getting the box actually happened before the U.S. even entered the war. So that kind of blows my mind a little bit too. And then another one is Gangs of New York. I found out that Bill the Butcher did exist, but he was not a target. There wasn't some big story, and there was not even a big battle of the 5 points. It was held by the Irish 100%. There was no question about it. So there's that one. And then let's see, the other ones that were kind of throwing me off too were Argo. U.S. was not the lead on this. It was Canada. Canada, for some reason, was the lead. So they don't get enough credit, apparently, historically, when it comes to espionage. But apparently they're sorry about it, and that's the way it is. Cool runnings. These guys were not actually sprinters before. They were Army recruits. They weren't outcasts at the game. People actually enjoyed them. Like they liked meeting them. There wasn't like any hardships there. Enemy at the Gates, which one of my favorite films. Jude Law was fantastic in this, but Vasily Zaitsev was not a huge role in the war. Like they made him huge, and I guess that's, and I don't know who that was for because it was made by America, so it wasn't like the Russia really wanted that extras. The Hurt Locker. There was a lot of bomb experts who were angry because most bombs in that area were dismantled by robots, not done by hand. So all these, and then not only that, but they showed Jeremy Renner's character as being kind of off the handle, and they said you got to be cool and collected or you're gonna die. So another one, and then the last one. I mean, it's just the last one that was really funny too was the fact that Sound of Music. Like they never actually walked through the Alps. They took trains. That's it. Like that's the story. They took a train. So it's not like they're gonna be like, oh my god, the hardships and the kids are so tired. They got in a train. They probably had a couple of bags and they had a snack on the way, and then bam, they were in London from quickly after that. So
are you saying that they didn't also sing the whole time? Is that not real either?
I think they did sing, but I think it was for another reason altogether.
Yeah.
I think there was a lot more darkness in that family than we want to believe too. So, but yeah, when it comes down to it, it just makes me laugh when it comes to these movies and history too.
Sure.
Remember the Titans was another one. That team that was coming from the back was actually dominant most of the season. Like it wasn't like it was like the last thing and they have a chance. They were dominant, and also some of the players said that the racial strife wasn't as big as a lot of people had made it out to be. So. I mean, what do you think about these kind of things? When we say, well, it was an American operation, when it was clearly British, can we not give credit to there? Or when we say, America and Ben Affleck are the ones who got them out, but really it was Canadians, and they, had a nice ham sandwich and everyone was happy afterwards. I mean, what's your guys' feelings when it comes to like facts on things like this? When it's not necessarily about artistic nature, but it's just a way to, I guess, shuffle in a specific demographic or audience.
I think it's okay for The Sound of Music because I think it's a much better movie with them running through the mountains than escaping on trains. So I'm completely okay with that one. The U-571 I was unaware of. It's not one of my favorite films to begin with, but that's fascinating. I don't see why we couldn't have. You don't want Matthew McConaughey to have a British accent, I'm sure. But I think we could have easily pulled that one off with British actors, and it might have actually been a decent film.
We love James Bond. Why couldn't we have like that? I mean, there's no reason.
The creative license is one thing, and sometimes I think they go overboard when they don't even need to. I was thinking when this conversation was going to happen that we were talking more about Quentin Tarantino, killing off Hitler in a theater, which was fantastic, right?
Right.
And so that's a different style of historical filmmaking, which he was not.
And that has validity too. I mean, that is the artistic nature of it. But at that point, we are actually aiming towards fiction as opposed to setting something up on a pedestal and trying to say based on a true story. That whole thing.
But as Danny pointed out, audiences don't necessarily know that. I mean, there were all those memes going around on Twitter probably a few years ago about all these younger viewers who didn't realize that the Titanic was real. People who would watch Titanic and not understand that it was a true story, even if Jack and Rose aren't real, the actual events, it's based on something true. So, I mean, I think in all these cases, it's all fine. I haven't seen every movie that you mentioned in your list there, but right. I think, and maybe it succeeds and maybe it doesn't, but in all cases, they're doing it in order to make the movie. I mean, Argo got a lot of criticism because not only the Canadian thing that you mentioned, but certain like really exciting, suspenseful things that happen in that movie didn't really happen the way that they're portrayed. But it was done that way in order to create an entertaining, suspenseful, exciting movie, and it worked out. It was a really good movie. It was really entertaining. A lot of people enjoyed it. So I think that's fine. and having Tarantino kill Hitler is also fine. And I'm sure there are some people who watch, especially maybe younger people who watch Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and don't really know anything about the Manson family and maybe think that was what really happened. Or maybe they think the whole thing is fiction and the Manson family didn't exist at all. And I feel like that doesn't even matter if the movie has artistic integrity and is accomplishing what it sets out to do. So I'm fine with all of this. I feel like when it's lazy, some movie like Bohemian Rhapsody, for example, that just mixes up a bunch of facts for the sake of throwing things together in the most obvious, easy way, that frustrates me more than something that's like taking an artistic leap.
Well, and I do agree with that when it comes to artistic leaps too. But like I said, like some of this also does feel lazy when it comes to history. And that was my main aspect because I do enjoy, I love taking satirical aspects. I mean, Jojo Rabbit is way different than, killing Hitler with Tarantino. And they both have their validity in their own ways when it comes to story and how the director wants, these things to appear. But at the same time, I do wish that they would, keep it historically accurate for people for no other reason than, as you mentioned, people do get their history from these things. People understand history by what characters say in movies and TV. And there are memes out there that are giving horrible information constantly that we are putting fact on so much. So I guess in a perfect world, I would love to see more of these historical come into place, but I do understand your angle, Jess, and I do believe in the artistic nature of it. But just because of hopes and dreams, I'm going to give it to Danny on this one. We have to.
I didn't realize this was a contest.
I want more history. I'm sorry. I would like the history to be correct. I just feel like it's lazy. So, I mean, if we can get away from that laziness, it doesn't hurt us. We have all these stories already. America has done some amazing things. I mean, I'm not even bringing up the stuff about Pearl Harbor and how those things were wrong and how much they changed the views. And I'm not going to bring up a word like propaganda and how that works. Maybe for a certain time in a certain place that works too. But I'm just going to say, you know what? If it doesn't hurt the story, could you be a little more accurate on it, just a little bit? If it's something that takes place a long time ago and you need to change it, but do we need to change Gladiator? Well, that's fine. I'm fine with changing Gladiator. That's far enough back where it's not, as relevant. But at the same time, I don't necessarily feel like Argo would have hurt if it was he was Canadian as opposed, or if Cool Runnings, you needed something in there, of course. But U571 could have been British and I would have been okay with that too. So, but moving on from that aspect, the next thing I would like to go over is this topic. And it is, we go right from history and we go to another historical thing that we're not as proud of. And that is, should controversial films from the past be held back or changed if they contain stereotypes, bigotry, and other things that that were accepted at time of creation? So at the time of creation, these things were accepted, but now they are things that we all blanch at and we want to erase them from the history. So Danny says, yes, we should hold them back or keep them out. And Josh says no. So let's start with you, Josh. Why no on this subject?
I mean, I'm very opposed to the idea of altering or disappearing art from the past. I think on our last topic, I felt like there was some wiggle room there, and it kind of goes on a case by case basis. But for this topic, I absolutely don't want any kind of precedent where a movie is either made unavailable or even worse, edited or altered or changed in I don't know what way, with digital effects added to some movie from decades ago to correct a perceived wrong. I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with, for example, what Disney Plus has been doing with some movies, with putting a disclaimer beforehand saying this movie contains outdated cultural ideas. And I think it would be fine to even make that a stronger disclaimer, just so people are aware of what they're getting into. I mean, I'm not saying you should spring it on people unsuspecting, but the idea that Disney has thrown Song of the South down the memory hole and isn't even willing to engage with it and think about why were things depicted this way, and explain how attitudes of the time influenced that in film, and why that those ideas were wrong, or why that they've changed, I don't think that does a service to anyone. It doesn't do a service to the movie, and it doesn't do a service to our modern understanding of older films to pretend that these movies didn't exist. So, I mean, from the perspective of Disney, the idea that there's kids maybe stumbling across this unawares, okay, but to just hide it away and never be able to see it for anyone, I think that's wrong. And I think Song of the South is obviously one of the most prominent examples, but I think that applies to a whole range. And you can look at so many older movies and see aspects that are troubling, and I don't think it does anybody a service to hide them away. I love Breakfast at Tiffany's, for example, is one of my favorite movies, and there's horrible racial stereotyping in that movie with Mickey Rooney's character. And I think it's important to understand that and to acknowledge it, but I also don't think that means that movie shouldn't be seen by anyone. And I still am willing to advocate for it as a great movie, despite this incredibly troubling aspect to it.
And then, so Danny, before we go into yours, I do want to bring up some of these movies too. So we talked about Songs of the South, a movie that now is a horror, and everyone at Disney doesn't want to talk about it. But they made a special Oscar for it, I believe, at the time to make sure it got an award. And then you go from there and you go over to, like you mentioned, Breakfast at Tiffany's. But another one that comes to mind that I actually watched, and now I think about it and I cringe, is the movie Soul Man. I mean, if you guys remember that one as well, he played blackface so this gentleman can get into Harvard and get a tuition. At the time, and that seems to be a way we were kind of moving along. And so you have that, and you, like as you mentioned, Breakfast at Tiffany's, Mickey Rourke, someone who was beloved, who was taking this on, and it was laughed and accepted. Another one could have been, The Toy with Richard Pryor. You're owning this man as a toy. You look at stuff that's even current, which is really the harshest ones. Did you guys remember the characters from Transformers: Revenge of the Fallen?
Yeah.
I mean, this guy has a gold tooth. He has a gold tooth, and they both talk with urban accents, and it's just the most horrible thing. Like I'm looking at this, and I'm thinking, why? And if you remember the first Transformers, the character Jazz came up, and the first words out of his mouth were, "What's up, bitch?" And it was in an urban accent, an urban dialect too. So I mean, that's where what's happening. Like, I don't understand why we're not learning, or what's accepted, or someone somewhere thought, you know what? The urban market wants to buy a toy, and they want something that's gonna like to them too. It's almost like we need to make an Asian, a Latino, all these different people, kind of G.I. Joes, so everyone could take one home, but let's make them into characters now too. But the problem is that thin line between having a good positive character and having someone who is racially insensitive is very much different. And even going back to older stuff that we enjoy, and talk about Disney Plus, like I was just thinking about the cats from Lady and the Tramp. We are Siamese, they're underhanded, they're trying to hurt the dog, they're trying to do all these things. And so I mean, I don't know where the line is crossed when it comes to childhood memories and the love of all these things. But it is very interesting to discuss it. So, Danny, let's get to you now and talk about this. Why should these things maybe have held back, or maybe things shouldn't be necessarily released or available to all audiences right now, I guess?
So my text on this is we live in a time where right and wrong and black and white is gray, right? People aren't accepting things that are fact. They're allowing propaganda to sway their opinions, and it's running rampant. My thought isn't to get rid of these films, right? So I don't want to see Birth of a Nation disappear. I don't mind it being appreciated for its historical value. But these things have to be brought out in their correct context. If what Josh said about Dumbo and Disney Plus puts a disclaimer on there, that's a change in my book, right? So in that word, and he's okay with that. That's exactly what I'm okay with too. I think it's okay for kids to even watch some of this stuff, but they have to understand the context of what they're watching. I don't think that a lot of TV stations are just going to be playing randomly Birth of a Nation and a jazz singer nonstop.
Right.
But I wouldn't mind a filmmaker, a film critic, a film expert, somebody getting on before the film starts, talking about the context of the film. And we need as a country, as a world, to have a better understanding of right and wrong. And while it was deemed right in that time, it is not necessarily right in today's time, and why. And I think that is not the conversation we're having. I want my son to be able to watch Blazing Saddles and have a blast watching it, because I did. And I still do, but I can understand the parody of it, and I don't take it for real. Confederate States of America is another one that I think is made as a parody. It's a Spike Lee joint, but if you just came in and started watching this film, you would think you were watching something from the 30s in Mississippi. I mean, it is a scary film unless you look at it in its correct context. So I think we need to understand context better in the films we're watching, and that is the change I would like, is that, if it's a disclaimer beforehand, or even before, if it's done during commercials, right after the commercial, people need to understand, just because this was made, this is not correct today.
Yeah, I mean, I essentially agree with you. I think the context is important, and we should still talk about these movies and criticizing them. I'm not saying that we shouldn't be criticizing them. I think it's very valuable. And I think, if you watch something like TCM, for example, and they show a lot of older movies that have a lot of outdated stereotypes and depictions in them, you listen to the hosts on TCM and they'll give you that context, and they'll talk about why this was done in a certain way. So I think that's fine. And I think it's what troubles me is the idea that, which didn't end up happening, but initially, like with Disney Plus, for example, that they were talking about, well, maybe Dumbo will edit it out those parts that are potentially offensive. And they didn't end up doing that, and I think that's good. I think it's far better to just make people aware of it. So, I mean, I think we maybe are essentially in agreement. What troubles me is getting rid of a movie, is saying no one can see this movie anymore, or making an edit or a change to a movie that was made decades ago because it doesn't fit with current ideas of right and wrong, or of what is acceptable. So as long as the movies remain intact and remain available, the more context that we have, the more discussion that we have, I think that's great. It's just, I don't want the movies themselves to be gone or to be altered.
And that's the thing too, is like how much, how deep do we go into all this stuff too? When it gets into satire, is it better if it's a comedy versus a drama, or if it's satirical like Jojo Rabbit? I mean, are we going to question White Chicks with the Wayans brothers? Are we going to question The Love Guru with Mike Myers? Are we going to question You Don't Mess with the Zohan with Adam Sandler? Or even more, are we going to question Tom Cruise in The Last Samurai? He wasn't even the character. He was just a guy. We're going to fit into that place. I was mad when Tom Cruise got the role of Jack Reacher because he didn't look right. And he was like a foot shorter than the character in the books that I love. So like there's certain things that automatically kind of, get my goat a little bit on there. But, you talk about that Disney Plus stuff, same exact thing, Dumbo with the crows, Peter Pan with the Native Americans, the cats in Lady and the Tramp, and then beloved ones too, like 16 Candles and The Donger. I mean, there's things like that people bring up, and it's crazy that we laughed and everything so much, and then now we've changed and become this world. I don't know what that curt word is, but to me it just feels like that shriek of like, oh my God, is anyone else gonna know that I'm laughing or I'm having fun? Or it's the way that comedians get away with it, because they're automatically you're in a comedy aspect, but we are, and I've actually talked about this before. Unfortunately, now in this day and age, we are no longer a society that implies. We are a society that infers. So it is how we intake things, and that is exactly how the world works now, which is sad. Because if somebody makes something and they want to say, this is why I made it, it doesn't matter anymore. It's how you intake it, and unfortunately, that leads to a lot of problems, because opinions are part of that intake process, and they automatically color everything as they come into you. So I have to say, I was interested in this topic very much, because I do want to know what everyone thinks and how their feelings are. But I do believe it is an art form. And I am going to go with Josh on this one. I feel like at the end of the day, like it's up to parents and it's up to people around you and who's in charge. Are you an adult? Can you understand? Can you read? Especially in this day and age when we have Google at our fingertips to find an answer to something. Not just we're going to make up the answer in our minds, but we can actually come up with the answer. So I feel there's a lot of art out there. So whether it's some of these movies, which a lot of those titles, which are not, not great, I love. So you can bring up these movies, and I mean, I didn't even bring up like Passion of the Christ, which was something that is, which cuts along religious aspects and people as well, or even Rob Reiner's North, where he had Amish people, cowboys, Inuits, played by Kathy Bates, Graham Greene, and Abe Vigoda.
But that's a terrible movie.
It's a terrible, but don't get me wrong. I'm just giving another reason not to watch it. So no one should watch it.
So many reasons not to watch that movie.
I'm just saying though, Rob Reiner, a guy you wouldn't expect to, make these leaps or bounds or whatever else, is essentially just saying, well, we'll just fill these people in and that's fine. We'll do whatever too. So, I do remember loving the movie Soul Man. I remember loving, I love the Transformer films for what they are. I did notice all these aspects the first time I watched them though, and I did question that. Gone with the Wind. I mean, some of the greatest films out there it's just part of the times, which, we have to kind of accept that as part of our history. And, but unfortunately that doesn't matter as much as the fact that this is, they need to be a time capsule. They need to be something that we just say, okay, this happened then. And, if you want to change the guns all to walkie-talkies, God bless you. But overall, I think I'm happy with just keeping the way they are, just keeping the way they are. And that'll make me happy from here on out. So, Josh wins that one. So thank you very much, Josh, on that. So let's get on to the big one. I think the one people are waiting for, and that is, who is the best Batman? And now this is something that has gone through, and I asked a couple people this question, and they were like, well, how deep do you go? Are we talking about TV? Are we talking about voices for cartoons? Are we talking about just the movie people? Are we talking about, where do we kind of start the line, stop the line kind of thing too? So let's start with, let's see here. We have Danny saying Christian Bale is his number one. And Josh is going with Mr. Michael Keaton. And of course I threw these other guys in there. We of course have Adam West. We have Ben Affleck and George Clooney with his nipple and Val Kilmer. So there's many different Batman options for Batman people out there. I've literally been in a room when someone told Val Kilmer that that's their favorite Batman. But then again, I'm also a little cynical. So I don't know if it was just because they were in a room with him they said that, or if that was an actual factual truth as well. He had the best lips of any Batman. I'll give him that. Michael Keaton following second. But let's start with, why is Mr. Michael Keaton the best Batman here?
Well, I think part of my selection, I think Michael Keaton is a fantastic Batman. And the first Batman movie, Tim Burton's first Batman, is one of my absolute favorite movies of all time. I watched it fairly recently because we did an episode of the podcast that I co-host, Awesome Movie Year, about this film. And I think he brings so much emotional layering to this role, not only as Batman, but also as Bruce Wayne. The idea of this kind of insecure, lonely guy who doesn't know how to function as a person and is only able to really relate to people when he dresses up in this bat suit and goes and fights crime. I think it's a fascinating portrayal of a fully realized person and not just a superhero. So I absolutely love Michael Keaton. But part of the reason also is that I really dislike Christian Bale as Batman and his stupid Batman voice. And in general, I'm not a big Christian Bale fan. I feel like he is such an actor that you always notice how much he is acting. So, I mean, it's partial, don't get me wrong. I think Michael Keaton is fantastic. And I think he's not only better than Christian Bale, but I think he's better than all the other choices that you put out there, including from TV and all of that. But in part, I think it's also a reaction against how much acclaim Christian Bale gets, which I think is a bit undeserved. And I'll take Keaton over him anytime. probably in a lot of roles and not just as Batman.
Now, do you feel like this is the whole Christian Bale thing is just brought up by the fact that it was Nolan and then of course Ledger, the Dark Knight being a seminal point for the Joker as a character, of course, too. Like, do you feel that's why Christian Bale gets brought up by the curve as opposed to necessarily his own acting?
Well, I think that's part of it, is that people love those movies so much. Yeah, sorry, Danny.
No, I thought that was my question. Sorry.
Sorry, yes.
You're good.
Go ahead.
No. I think you're onto that. So go ahead.
No,
I was just going to say that, yes, I mean, I think that's true, that the people love everything about those movies, and that does help elevate him, whereas maybe the Burton movies people feel are more uneven. But, I mean, Danny, take this, but I think people who love Bale's performance do love it just for itself as well.
Right. All right, let's talk to Danny here. And Mr. Christian Bale is your go-to Batman. You want him to save you. So let's find out why that is.
I think Christian Bale is a better actor. I think he's broodier. I think it does have a lot to do with Christopher Nolan and the entire production too. But my problem, I like Michael Keaton. I think he's fine. But those first movies, especially with Tim Burton, were more quirky. I think his character was more of a character actor. I think the villains were the lead actors. In fact, if you look at the nominations, Jack Nicholson got the Best Actor nomination, whereas Heath Ledger got Best Supporting. Christian Bale was the Batman. He was the big boy in the movie, and everybody else was minor, even Heath Ledger and all the other villains that they've seen. Whereas the villain was always the lead actor in the early Batman films with Tim Burton and Joel Schumacher and everybody. So I think Christian Bale's a better Batman. I think he's the best Batman we've seen. I think he might be the best Batman we will ever see.
Now, but talk about his Bruce Wayne for you as well, because Bruce Wayne is something that people leave behind sometimes, and that is equally a big part of who Batman is.
But in Batman Begins, I think they explore that enough that it carries through to the rest of the film. So I have no problem with that. I think we really get to know Bruce Wayne very well in that first movie, and that to me is enough.
So you like the idea of venturing back, Ra's al Ghul, and kind of teaching his way through that kind of thing as well.
100%. I like that they used a villain we didn't really even know unless you really were into that universe, which I was not. So it was a villain I never even heard of, and I went into the film not knowing what to expect and came out just loving it.
And I feel like people definitely go to these two tentpole people when it comes down to it. In the same way that if we talked about Superman, people would be talking about Henry Cavill and Christopher Reeve. I mean, those are the two that you're going to talk about. So is there a reason you think that the other ones just didn't make it? Was it director? Was the story, or is it just the camp of Adam West on TV, and that's why he wasn't going to make it? Maybe. Do you guys have any thoughts on why the other ones just weren't going to be anywhere in your top of your list? Let's go, Josh.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is a big part of it, is that those other movies aren't very good, that the Schumacher films are generally pretty heavily mocked, and the overall quality is not great, and the Zack Snyder films also are not exactly, well, they have they're very passionate defenders. In a general sense, they're not hugely well regarded. So I do think, as I was saying before, that the context does make a difference, that because the whole package of those Christopher Nolan movies appeals to people so much, that Christian Bale is a part of that. For me, the Burton movies are so much better than the Nolan movies, and I think key reason why. But absolutely, it's about the whole picture. The performance does kind of accurate.
And okay, so you guys picked yours, Christian Bale and Michael Keaton. Let me ask, who was your second? If I just want to know, who would have been your second Batman's? Let's say for Josh, who would have been your second after Michael Keaton?
I mean, I would probably go with Adam West just because it's very different, and I feel like it shows a whole other side of the character. I think I don't want it to be more broody and more dark. I'd like a fun, light portrayal to kind of counterpoint. So I loved watching those Adam West TV episodes when I was a kid, and so I would probably pick him.
How about you, Danny? Who's your second?
That's a tough one. I would probably go with Michael Keaton, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
But I would also throw in, I would have loved to have seen what George Clooney could have done with a better director, a better script, because I think George Clooney is, again, fantastic actor, and I think he was just in a really bad project.
Yeah. Well, he's also said, he felt like he almost killed the franchise on his own too. He's talked at comic conventions. He went to one and he said, well, he apologized the first thing he came out just for the movie as a whole, and so that's definitely something that comes up to into play too. So I definitely have a feeling about all these two. I did, I still watch these films too. Unfortunately, I was at different ages when these films came out, so I love the darkness of Michael Keaton film. But then again, I was also the kid who bought all the McDonald's toys when Val Kilmer came out and George Clooney. So I have the cups and the Riddler things and all these different stuff that came out. So that was part of my world because of that, because it was a much bigger spectrum then. Tim Burton didn't necessarily make the toys that came with the original Batman, but the Joel Schumacher stuff was all bright, and you wanted the Arnold Schwarzenegger toy and the all these different things that kind of came about. So I remember those being part of my world, and that's why I ended up loving some of those franchises. Not necessarily because of the movie, just because of it. It's almost like a marker in the time of my life too. So I definitely feel that way. But as I get older, I look at different films too, and I have to kind of just judge what I love. And so even though I want to say that Keaton or Bale is best, I have to go with both you guys on this one, because it is really going to be about what you want out of your character. Both of them had amazing Jokers, but I want to say like Keaton was just someone I felt was a very somber choice, but it was because of a Tim Burton world, I think, at the end of the day, that I loved him and the way that everything came about. And in the same way that when I watch alien films, Giger stuff, as it carries through, makes me love the franchise because of its look automatically too. And then Christian Bale, I do have a problem with the whole voice thing too. Recently, I don't know if you guys know this, on Vero, Zack Snyder actually did another new commentary for Batman versus Superman: Dawn of Justice, and I watched it, and it was interesting when he was talking about Ben Affleck's voice. He goes, because we didn't want to do the gruff cough voice, everything too. So they said we had to make it tough without making it seem like we're trying to chase after Christian Bale's gruff voice or trying to make it, dark or weird. It was just trying to be like a tough alternate voice, but not necessarily, throwing your voice out, blood seeping out as you're trying to get that dark, deep thing and going on. So that is very interesting to me when it comes to those characters too. So I very much was looking forward to talking about this, because those are both great points when it comes to both characters. I gotta say, there are, I can watch the first two Tim Burton, Michael Keaton Batmans and be pretty happy with it. And then I can watch the first two Nolan movies as well. The third one kind of lost me a little bit. I wasn't happy with that whole aspect there too. But I do want to thank you, gentlemen, for coming on. Before I leave though, I do want to talk a little bit about what you're watching right now. So tell me, what is it that you are currently watching? What is it that people should be watching right now? So let's start with Danny.
Right now, I'm catching up on a lot of Netflix. I'm real excited.
That's a way open world. You have to close it down a little bit.
Ozark season 3 just started, so I just finished episode 1. I finished The Tiger King, which was just ridiculous great, but I'm from Oklahoma, so I have probably a deeper appreciation than most.
Only $2,000.
Do what?
Only $2,000 get you a tiger.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, I think he raised the price to $4,000 towards the end, but yeah, I wish I would have known about the $2,000 tigers back then. I just finished The Outsider on HBO. Stephen King, real dark, great little series. And then I want to sell you on Ugly Delicious, which is on Netflix. It follows the world of David Chang from Momofuku Milk Bar in New York. He gets a lot of random celebrities and travels around the world showing how culturally, while food might be different, it's all the same. And, he actually proclaims in the first season that Houston is the food mecca of the world. I would
really?
have to agree with that. But yeah, it gets you excited
who bought
about
that
food
one?
Everywhere. Do what?
Who bought that fact?
Yeah. Hook, line, and sinker.
Yeah. All right. So Josh, let's talk about what you're watching right now. What should we be checking out?
Well, movie-wise, also on Netflix, The Platform, which is a Spanish horror movie that premiered, I think, about a week ago. It's brutal and intense. It's maybe not the thing that everyone wants to watch right now when things are brutal and intense in the world. But if you can handle that, it is extremely well made. It's really unsettling, and it has smart points to make about how the world works both right now and in general. I like that one a lot on Netflix. Generally on VOD to rent, there's a teen comedy that also came out last week called Banana Split with Hannah Marks and Liana Liberato. Hannah Marks also co-wrote the screenplay. It's a great movie about teen girl friendship, about these two girls who were dating the same guy and then they become kind of unlikely friends, and it's about that bond, going beyond the whole idea of romance, and it's just really fun and great music and all of that. So movie-wise, I like those a lot. TV series-wise, I really enjoyed Vagrant Queen, which is on Sci-Fi. I think the first episode just aired this past week, and I've seen the first 5 for a review I wrote, and it's super low budget. It has a lot of creature effects that kind of look like cosplay from a convention and CGI that doesn't quite look right, but it really leans into that lo-fi feel. It's clever, it's got some great characters, and it barely has gotten any media coverage for a show on Sci-Fi, so I hope people will check it out. It's based on a comic book series. I think it maybe airs on Fridays, so Vagrant Queen on Sci-Fi.
Speaking of that too, is there anything you guys are revisiting? Because this is something that a lot of people are doing with all this free time. HBO put out word, and I talked about this too a little bit, was the fact that everyone who said they were going to start watching The Wire have actually started watching The Wire for the first time. The best show ever made. Everyone always talks about it, and it was always on everyone's list of when I have the time. And so apparently this is when I have the time. So is there anything you guys have kind of gone into as well? Like right now you were talking about Sci-Fi, and I'm like, I haven't watched Eureka in a while. I love that show back when, those kind of things. I've rewatched 30 Rock recently, and I'm trying to avoid some of the other ones too that are just insanely long that I just don't want to get into. No one needs to rewatch The West Wing all over again with hour-long episodes. Well, I mean, there's only so many seasons on that anyways, but it'd be like if I decided I'm going to have a Law and Order marathon where I watch every episode of every iteration. Like, that's going to be the whole thing. I come out of it, and the only thing I know how to do is do little Lenny Briscoe little jokes and quips here or there. So besides that, I have to say Vivarium, which is great with Jesse Eisenberg and Imogen Poots, which is fantastic. I did also get a chance to what was the other one? The Other Lamb, which just came out. It's kind of like The Handmaid's Tale with a lot of horror, and it's a very cultish movie. Let's see. Netflix just came out with Coffee and Kareem with Ed Helms, Taraji P. Henson. So that's a really fun movie. Not necessarily as good as I wanted it to be, but it's a filler. I mean, at the same time, coming up, which I'm really excited about, actually, Amazon Prime, which if you don't have Netflix, you have to either pay more for 4K Ultra HD to get that, or just pay for the regular. Well, Amazon Prime gives you the Ultra HD free, and they're actually re-releasing some of the James Bond movies in 4K Ultra HD. So that's really cool right now. I'm really excited about that. And then outside of that, like I said, I watched that commentary by Zack Snyder, which was really fun and interesting to watch. Him talking about it. He showed some of his books and the drawings and how he wanted things to look, and he was explaining why certain things worked. Now, I'm still not a fan of the movie, but it was a fun experience to watch it. So as much as I would, and I do enjoy Man of Steel. So Man of Steel, I know, Josh, you said you weren't a fan of any of those movies, but I thought Man of Steel, the reason is because I enjoy when they make Superman actually physical. He's a physical fighter. He's a hero. He's strong. Like, I wanted him to be physical. And so when that was delivered, I really did enjoy that. So, but outside of that, those are the things that I'm watching right now, catching up with. But gentlemen, I want to thank you very much. Let's talk about where they can find you and learn more about you. Danny, the floor is yours. Tell them where they can find you.
Yeah, so you can just go to my website, crunchonthis.com or cron.com for the Houston Chronicle website, and I'm in the Houston Community newspapers every week. So,
all right, and Josh, you've got many places. Let them know.
Yes, many, many places. Well, it's all kind of aggregated. If you follow me on Twitter at Signal Bleed or on Facebook at Josh Bell Hates Everything, my website, joshbellhateseverything.com. My reviews are at cbr.com, at Crooked Marquee, at Film Racket, and on KTNV TV here in Las Vegas.
Fantastic. Well, gentlemen, I want to thank you very much for being part of this. We didn't really find out who the best Batman was. Both of them inch forward in their own aspects for sure. But we did find out, I feel, that we should keep certain aspects of history when it comes to art in its place, in my opinion anyways, that we should keep films around. They should still be available, but we should make sure that people understand the context, as well as parents should stop kids from seeing certain things. It's just the way it is, you know. It doesn't seem like, even though Disney Plus does have those words ahead of time, it doesn't necessarily have an age gate. It doesn't say this is only for kids over, or, you know, does your parents say this is okay button, or anything along those lines. And then going with historical events, I went with Danny on the fact that I do want you to tell me the history if you can, if it doesn't hurt anything. Like, there's no reason for it. Like, we don't need you to tell me that it's British, or that it's American when it's not. You don't need to tell me that this happened when it didn't. And you can embellish characters to make the story great, but you can also kind of keep some of the aspects too. So it doesn't hurt anything to kind of try to keep near the road, at least so you can see it, as opposed to veering off 90 degrees and just going off on your own tangent. So, gentlemen, once again, thank you. You're wrong. Here's why. Episode 3 is done. And hopefully we'll catch you guys again soon. Have a great day.
Thanks, Derek.